It all began when I noticed the subtle changes in Sarah. We'd been married for 7 years, and I thought we had a solid foundation. That was until I returned from my time at the VA hospital, where I was going through a recovery program for my PTSD after serving overseas. It was a tough battle, and I relied on her support to help pull me through. But now, I felt like I was the one fighting a war at home. At first, it was just small things. She started coming home late from work, citing extra hours or meetings that seemed to pop up out of nowhere. I tried to brush it off, telling myself she was just caught up in her job. But deep down, my instincts screamed at me that something was off. There was a time she forgot to mention a work event, and I had to find out she was out with her coworkers through social media posts where she looked overly happy, with no sign of the stress I was feeling. I started to feel paranoid. I would stay up late, scrolling through her social media, trying to piece everything together. The anxiousness gnawed at me like a dog with a bone, and I could only focus on the creeping doubts. It was like my mind was betraying me all over again. I was finally starting to heal from one betrayal, only to be thrown back into the uncertainty of another. One afternoon, I happened to overhear her on the phone while I pretended to be asleep on the couch. I could hear her laughter, a sound that used to fill me with warmth, now sent chills down my spine. She was talking to someone named Mark. The way she giggled, the flirtation in her voice, it felt like a dagger to my heart. My hands clenched into fists as I fought the urge to confront her right then and there. Instead, I waited until she was done, hoping I would find some sort of explanation or context for what I had just heard. Days passed, and I found myself in a tailspin of emotions. I was angry, sad, and completely betrayed. Was I just a safety net for her? Was I so broken that she'd look elsewhere for comfort while I was trying so hard to put myself back together? My mind raced with these questions, and the more I thought about it, the more I wanted to know the truth. Then the fateful day arrived. I was out running a few errands and decided to stop by the VA hospital to pick up some paperwork for my therapy sessions. While I was there, I bumped into one of the nurses who mentioned she had seen Sarah come in a couple of times. I felt the blood drain from my face. Why was my wife visiting the VA? Wasn't that where I was getting treatment? My gut tightened as a million thoughts raced through my mind. I had to know what was going on. I headed home, my heart pounding as I tried to piece everything together. When I got back, I found Sarah lounging on the couch, her phone in hand. I approached her, trying to keep my voice steady. "Hey, can I ask you something?" Her smile faded as she looked up, a flicker of concern crossing her eyes. "Sure, honey, what's up?" I took a deep breath. "Why were you at the VA? Who is Mark?" The atmosphere shifted instantly. Her expression hardened, and I could feel the tension thickening in the air. She opened her mouth to speak, but I cut her off, desperate for answers. "I heard you talking to him on the phone. What's going on, Sarah?" Her excuses came pouring out. She tried to downplay her connection with Mark, claiming he was just a friend from work and that she didn't mean anything by it. But the way she fumbled over her words, the way her eyes darted around the room, I could see the lies pouring from her lips. It felt like I was watching a bad movie where the protagonist was so blinded by love that they couldn't see the obvious. I wanted to scream, to shake her and demand the truth, but I felt frozen in place. The betrayal stung more than any physical wound I had ever suffered. She was supposed to be my partner, my rock during this turbulent time, and yet here she was, lying to my face. As her excuses continued to flow, I slowly started realizing that I was witnessing the unraveling of my marriage right before my eyes. The woman I had trusted with my heart and soul was now someone I barely recognized. I needed to process everything, but the emotional turmoil was overwhelming. How could I ever trust her again? My chest felt heavy as I slumped down into a chair, staring blankly at the floor. In that moment, I knew I had to make a decision. I couldn't stay in a marriage built on deception. The road ahead was going to be painful, but it was the only way I could reclaim my life. I could feel the fire of anger rising within me, igniting a spark of determination I thought had faded away. I was ready to fight back and take control of my future. The confrontation left me in a whirlwind of emotions. I spent the next few days going through the motions, but inside, I felt like a storm was brewing. I kept replaying our argument in my mind, questioning every moment leading up to that confrontation. It was hard to believe that the woman I loved could betray me so deeply, especially during a time when I was vulnerable and fighting my own battles. The more I thought about Sarah's lies, the more I realized I needed a plan. I couldn't simply walk away without understanding the full extent of her betrayal. The thought of her with another man, especially someone so intimately involved in my recovery, was infuriating. Mark was a therapist at the VA, and it horrified me to think he could be preying on vulnerable patients. But that wasn't the only thing I was grappling with. I needed to catch Sarah in the act to solidify the reality of my situation. One night, after a long day of feeling lost and confused, I decided to do something I never thought I would. I would follow her. It felt wrong, like I was crossing a line, but I needed closure. I needed to see with my own eyes who this Mark was and what my wife was really doing. I waited until she got ready for work and left, pretending to be engrossed in the television. I grabbed my keys and followed her car. My heart raced as I trailed behind her, keeping a safe distance. The drive felt like an eternity as I tried to calm my racing thoughts. Would she stop somewhere? Would I actually witness something that would shatter me even further? She drove to a small cafe that I had never noticed before, tucked away in a quiet corner of town. I parked a block away and waited, watching as she walked in, her posture relaxed and carefree, completely unaware that I was watching her. I could see her through the window, chatting animatedly with someone at a small table. My heart sank as I recognized Mark. The way they leaned into each other, sharing laughter and glances that felt too intimate, made my blood boil. It was everything I had feared and more. I sat there, seething with anger, my fists clenched on the steering wheel. I wanted to storm in there and confront them both, but held myself back. I needed to gather evidence, to solidify my feelings of betrayal with something tangible. I reached for my phone and snapped a picture of them, feeling a mix of satisfaction and disgust at my own actions. After what felt like an eternity, they finally stood up to leave. I couldn't believe my eyes when I saw them hold hands briefly before parting ways. My heart felt like it was being ripped from my chest. I watched as Sarah walked back to her car, blissfully unaware of the storm brewing. Inside me, I needed to act, and I needed to act fast. The next day I planned my approach carefully. I had so many emotions swirling inside me: anger, sadness, betrayal, but I needed to channel those feelings into something productive. I didn't want to be the victim any longer. I was tired of feeling powerless. It was time to take control. When Sarah came home that evening, I was waiting for her in the living room. I could see the subtle change in her demeanor as she walked through the door, her smile faltering when she saw me. I could feel the tension thickening in the air. "Hey, what's wrong?" she asked, feigning ignorance. I took a deep breath, keeping my voice steady. "We need to talk about Mark." Her expression shifted instantly. She hesitated, and I could tell she was scrambling for a lie or excuse. "What do you mean? Mark is just a coworker." "Just a coworker," I shot back, my voice rising slightly. "I saw you with him, Sarah. I saw everything. You're lying to me, and I can't believe you do this." Her face paled, and for a second I could see genuine fear in her eyes. "It's not what you think. It was just a friendly meeting," she protested, her voice rising, but it was too late. The truth hung heavy in the room, suffocating any semblance of trust. "Friendly meeting, holding hands, laughing together. You think I'm that naive?" I spat, the anger bubbling over. "You've been lying to me, and I deserve better than this." She opened her mouth to respond, but I cut her off. "You've betrayed my trust when I needed you the most. You think I'm just supposed to accept that? You're my wife, Sarah, and you've shattered everything we built together." Her facade began to crack, and for the first time I saw her vulnerability. "I didn't mean for it to happen," she pleaded. "I was just trying to cope with everything. I didn't think it would get this out of hand." Coping with my PTSD. I couldn't hold back the hurt that laced my voice. "You've betrayed me in the very space where I was supposed to find healing. You took advantage of my vulnerability. You think that's acceptable?" I could see the realization hitting her like a freight train. Her eyes filled with tears, but I couldn't muster any sympathy. The pain I felt was too raw, too fresh. "I don't know what else to say," she finally whispered, her voice trembling. "You don't have to say anything. I've made my decision," I replied, the finality in my tone echoing in the silence. I wasn't just a victim of her betrayal. I was ready to stand up for myself and reclaim my life. The road ahead was uncertain, but I knew I wouldn't walk it alone. Now it was time to figure out what my next steps would be. I deserved more than the lies and deceit that had defined my marriage. I needed to take back my power and find healing through authentic connections, ones that were built on trust and respect. After that confrontation, I felt a whirlwind of emotions. My heart was heavy, and my mind was racing with thoughts. The anger that surged through me was like a tidal wave, but beneath it lay an undeniable sense of relief. I had finally laid everything bare. Confrontations had a way of cutting through the fog of uncertainty, even if the truth was painful. But now I was faced with the daunting task of figuring out what to do next. In the days that followed, Sarah and I lived in a strange limbo. She was filled with apologies, trying to prove her remorse, but I had already made up my mind. I was done with the lies. Her attempts to make amends felt hollow, like she was trying to piece together a shattered vase with glue. I needed space to think, to breathe, and to process everything that had happened. I decided to take some time away from our home. I rented a small cabin by a lake, hoping the peaceful surroundings would help me find clarity. It was a stark contrast to the chaos that had consumed my life. As I settled in, I took long walks by the water, allowing my thoughts to flow freely. I reflected on my struggles with PTSD, the progress I had made, and how I had allowed myself to be dependent on someone who had turned out to be untrustworthy. Every day felt like a battle, but with each sunrise, I began to feel a sense of liberation. I was no longer bound by the weight of betrayal. I started reaching out to old friends and reconnecting with people I had lost touch with during my marriage. I found comfort in their support and understanding, sharing my experience and seeking advice. I began attending local support groups, finding solace in the stories of others who had faced similar struggles. One evening, while I was sitting on the porch of the cabin, I received a text from Sarah. The message was heartfelt, filled with apologies and pleas for a second chance. It was clear she was still reeling from the impact of my confrontation. I could feel the weight of her words, but I also knew that I had to stay strong. I replied simply, "I need time. I can't rush this." It felt empowering to assert my boundaries. As the days turned into weeks, I started to realize how much I had been holding back. My healing process had been derailed by Sarah's betrayal, but it was also awakening something deep inside me. I began to explore my passions, painting, writing, and even hiking. I found peace in nature, where I could escape the noise of my thoughts and the turmoil of my past. One day, while hiking through the trails, I met a woman named Emily. We struck up a conversation, and I found myself opening up about my experiences. She had her own struggles with relationships and PTSD, having come out of a tumultuous marriage herself. There was an instant connection, and for the first time in a long time, I felt a spark of hope. Emily listened without judgment, and I felt seen in a way I hadn't in years. We exchanged numbers, and over the course of the next few weeks, we began texting and meeting up for hikes. It was refreshing to connect with someone who understood my pain without needing to be told. Emily didn't press me about my past or my marriage. Instead, she encouraged me to share at my own pace, and I appreciated her for that. I could feel my heart beginning to heal as I rediscovered joy through authentic connection. Meanwhile, Sarah continued to reach out, sending texts filled with apologies and reminders of the love we once shared. I felt compassion for her as I read her messages, but I also reminded myself of the pain she caused. I had made a promise to myself to put my well-being first. I couldn't allow guilt to cloud my judgment. One evening, after spending time with Emily, I received a call from Sarah. She sounded desperate, her voice trembling as she spoke. "Can we please talk? I miss you. I need to explain everything." I hesitated. I knew this conversation could open old wounds, but I also recognized that it could provide clarity. I agreed to meet her at a coffee shop the next day. As I prepared for our meeting, a mix of anxiety and determination filled me. I had so many feelings to unpack, and I wanted to be honest without letting her manipulate my emotions. When I arrived at the coffee shop, I found Sarah already sitting at a table, her eyes glassy with unshed tears. She looked different, broken, yet hopeful. I took a seat across from her, steeling myself for the conversation ahead. "I'm sorry for everything," she started, her voice shaking. "I messed up. I was lost and I made terrible choices. I wish I could take it back." I listened as she spoke, pouring out her regrets, her explanation of feeling overwhelmed with my PTSD, and how she sought comfort in someone who was supposed to help me. It was a convoluted justification, but I could see the weight of her guilt bearing down on her. "I know I can't take back what I've done, but I want to work on myself. I want to prove to you that I can change," she said, her eyes searching mine for some flicker of hope. I took a deep breath, weighing my response carefully. I had been hearing her apologies for weeks, but the reality was that I wasn't sure I could ever see her the same way again. "Sarah, I can't just forget what happened. You chose to betray me during one of the most vulnerable times in my life. Trust is not something that can be repaired easily." Her shoulders slumped, and I felt a part of me wanting to reach out and comfort her, but I had to stay firm. "I need to focus on my healing right now. I can't go back to what we had. It's too painful and I'm still figuring things out for myself." Sarah nodded, tears streaming down her face, but she didn't fight me. I could see she was finally understanding the gravity of her actions. We parted ways that day without any promises or expectations. I felt a sense of closure, knowing I had set my boundaries firmly. As I left the coffee shop, I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of my decisions begin to lift. I had taken the first step toward reclaiming my life, embracing the healing journey rather than being consumed by betrayal. I knew the road ahead would be long, but I was no longer alone. I had found strength in my connections, and I was determined to continue healing, one step at a time. In the weeks that followed my conversation with Sarah, I found myself navigating a complex emotional landscape. It was like walking through a dense fog, not entirely sure where I was headed, but with a clearer sense of direction than before. I was committed to my healing journey, and I had started to embrace the things that brought me joy again. Emily had become a significant part of my life, and even though I was cautious, I found myself drawn to her warmth and understanding. Our connection felt refreshing, almost like the first breath of fresh air after being underwater for too long. She understood my struggles with PTSD, and she shared her own experiences with relationships, which created a safe space for both of us to be vulnerable. One afternoon, after a long hike, we sat on a bench overlooking a tranquil lake, the sun setting in a blaze of oranges and pinks. "You know," she said, breaking the comfortable silence, "it's okay to take your time. Healing isn't linear, and you don't have to rush into anything." I nodded, appreciating her perspective. "I've been through a lot, and I feel like I'm just starting to understand what I want. Leaving my marriage was a big step, but I still feel the echoes of everything that happened." Emily turned to me, her expression earnest. "That's completely valid. You're allowed to feel everything you're feeling. Just don't lose sight of your own needs." Her words resonated deeply with me. I realized I had spent so long worrying about others, Sarah, my family, the expectations of society, that I had neglected my own well-being. I was finally learning to prioritize myself, and it felt liberating. Meanwhile, Sarah continued to make attempts to reach out. She sent me messages, sometimes pleading and sometimes apologetic, but I had come to a point where I felt indifferent to her attempts. I recognized that she was struggling with the consequences of her actions, but I also understood that I couldn't be her emotional support system anymore. I had to put myself first. One day, as I was sorting through some old belongings at my cabin, I stumbled upon a box of memories, pictures, love letters, and mementos from my time with Sarah. As I flipped through the contents, nostalgia washed over me, but it was quickly followed by a wave of anger. I saw moments that once brought me happiness and realized how they had been tainted by betrayal. I sat with that feeling for a while, allowing myself to grieve the loss of what I once thought was a beautiful relationship. Later that week, I decided to clear out some of the things that reminded me too much of Sarah. I gathered everything into bags, preparing to donate or toss what I no longer wanted. As I worked, I felt a sense of lightness begin to replace the heaviness that had lingered in my heart. I was reclaiming my space, my memories, and my life. During this process, I received a call from my therapist at the VA. He wanted to check in on my progress and see how I was coping. I felt a mix of gratitude and apprehension as I answered. He asked how I was feeling since my separation. "I'm getting there, but it's been hard," I admitted. "I'm still processing everything, and I finally feel like I'm on the right path, but I don't know if I'm ready to dive back into the dating scene or anything." "That's okay," he replied. "Focus on your healing. You're not in a race, and it's important to take the time you need. You deserve to find happiness that isn't tainted by past pain." His words stuck with me. I realized that I didn't need to rush into new relationships or feel pressured to find someone to fill the void. I needed to take the time to rediscover who I was outside of my marriage. I had spent years identifying myself as Sarah's husband. Now, it was my time to find my own identity. As the weeks turned into months, I continued to grow closer to Emily. Our connection deepened as we shared more about our lives, dreams, and fears. We explored new places together, and I found joy in the little moments, laughing together over coffee, sharing our favorite books, and enjoying long hikes through scenic trails. I felt safe with her, and it was a feeling I hadn't experienced in a long time. One evening, as we were sitting on the porch of the cabin, watching the stars twinkle in the night sky, Emily turned to me. "You know, I've really enjoyed spending time with you. You have this light about you that draws people in, and I can see you're starting to embrace it again." Her words brought a smile to my face. "Thank you. It's taken a lot of work to get here, but I'm finally starting to feel like myself again." Emily reached for my hand, intertwining her fingers with mine. "Just remember, you're not alone in this. I'm here for you no matter what happens." In that moment, I felt a flicker of hope. I was beginning to believe in the possibility of love again, but I knew I had to be cautious. I had to protect my heart while also allowing myself to be open to new experiences. Despite the budding relationship with Emily, I knew I still had unresolved feelings about my marriage. One day, I decided to reach out to Sarah one last time. I wanted to hear her side of the story, to understand her better, and to get closure. I figured that I owed it to myself to gain a complete perspective before moving forward. We agreed to meet at the same coffee shop where we had our last conversation. As I walked in, I felt a mixture of anticipation and anxiety. I wasn't sure what to expect from her, but I was determined to remain grounded in my own feelings. Sarah was already seated when I arrived, her expression a blend of anxiety and hope. "Thank you for meeting me," she said softly, her voice trembling slightly. I took a seat across from her, preparing myself for whatever was to come. "I need to understand what happened between us, why you made the choices you did." As she spoke, I listened intently. She described her feelings of inadequacy and how she struggled to cope with my PTSD. She admitted to seeking comfort from Mark and how she let her emotions overwhelm her, leading to choices that hurt both of us. I could see the regret in her eyes, but I also felt the emotional distance that had grown between us. "I never wanted to hurt you," Sarah said, tears streaming down her cheeks. "I was scared and I thought I was losing you. I made a terrible mistake." Her words resonated with me, but they didn't erase the pain I had felt. I realized that while I could empathize with her struggles, I was no longer the person who could support her. I had to prioritize my own healing. "I appreciate you sharing your side," I responded, keeping my tone calm. "But I have to be honest, what happened between us has changed everything. I can't go back to what we had. I need to focus on myself now." Her nod was filled with understanding, and though it hurt to say goodbye to that chapter of my life, I felt a sense of relief. I was finally closing the door on our past, ready to embrace my future, whatever it held. As I left the coffee shop, I felt lighter. I had gained closure and clarity, and I was ready to continue my journey toward healing and self-discovery. With Emily by my side, I felt hope blossoming in my heart, reminding me that even after the darkest storms, the sun could shine again. With each passing day, I felt a sense of renewal within myself. Closing that chapter with Sarah had been a necessary step in my healing journey. I was no longer weighed down by the past. Instead, I was embracing a future filled with possibilities. My connection with Emily deepened, and as we spent time together, I found myself opening up in ways I hadn't thought possible. One weekend, we decided to take a trip to the mountains. The idea was to escape the daily grind and immerse ourselves in nature. As we drove, I felt a sense of excitement bubbling inside me. It was the first time I had genuinely looked forward to an outing since the turmoil of my marriage. The cabin we rented was quaint and surrounded by towering pines, with a stunning view of the mountains in the distance. We spent our days hiking, exploring the trails, and enjoying quiet evenings filled with laughter and conversation. Emily had a way of drawing me out of my shell, encouraging me to share my thoughts, dreams, and even my fears. One night, as we sat on the porch watching the stars twinkle overhead, Emily turned to me with a serious expression. "I really care about you, you know. I can see how hard you've worked to get here, and I'm so proud of you." Her words touched me deeply. I had been so focused on my healing that I hadn't taken the time to reflect on how far I had come. "Thank you, Emily. This journey hasn't been easy, but having you by my side has made a world of difference," I replied, feeling a genuine connection with her. As the night wore on, I felt a warmth spreading through me. I was finally allowing myself to be vulnerable again, and it felt liberating. In that moment, I decided to take a leap of faith. "I think I'm ready to explore what this could be between us. I don't want to rush anything, but I'm open to seeing where it goes." Emily's face lit up with a smile that made my heart race. "I'd love that. We can take our time and just enjoy each other's company. No pressure." That night marked a turning point for me. I realized that I could allow myself to love and be loved again, and it felt like a weight had been lifted. I didn't have to be afraid of repeating the past. I could forge a new path based on trust and mutual support. As the weeks rolled by, I embraced this new relationship with Emily while still focusing on my own healing journey. I attended therapy sessions regularly, discussing my feelings about the past and my hopes for the future. I learned how to communicate my needs and set boundaries, not just with Emily but in all aspects of my life. I was no longer afraid to voice my feelings and advocate for myself. However, the shadow of my marriage with Sarah still lingered. I found myself reflecting on the lessons learned through that experience, and I recognized the importance of healthy communication in any relationship. I was determined not to lose sight of myself again. One evening, as Emily and I sat on the porch of my cabin, I decided to open up about my struggles. "You know, I've been thinking a lot about my past and how it's shaped me. I want to be open with you about my experiences, especially my marriage." Emily nodded, her expression encouraging. "I appreciate you sharing that with me. I want to understand what you've been through." I took a deep breath, recalling my journey and the pain I had endured. I spoke about my PTSD, the challenges I faced in my marriage with Sarah, and how I had found myself lost in her betrayal. "I'm still healing from it all," I admitted, "and I want to make sure I'm not bringing any of that baggage into what we have." Emily listened attentively, her eyes filled with compassion. "I understand. We all have our baggage, and it's okay to take your time. Just know that I'm here to support you no matter what." Her words reassured me, and I felt grateful for her presence in my life. I realized that I didn't have to carry the weight of my past alone. Together, we could navigate the complexities of our emotions, moving forward hand in hand. As the summer months passed, I felt more grounded in my healing. I made sure to prioritize self-care, spending time outdoors, journaling, and continuing therapy. I also found joy in small moments, cooking meals with Emily, exploring new hiking trails, and simply enjoying each other's company. But just as I was beginning to feel settled in my new life, the past came knocking once again. One evening, I received a text from Sarah. It was unexpected, and my heart raced as I read her message. "Can we talk? I really need to see you." I felt a mix of emotions, anxiety, dread, and a hint of curiosity. Part of me wanted to ignore her and put that chapter behind me, but another part knew I had to face this head-on. I had come too far to let fear dictate my decisions. I took a moment to gather my thoughts before responding. I can meet you tomorrow afternoon, but I want to be clear, I'm not interested in rekindling anything between us. I just want closure. As I hit send, I felt a rush of adrenaline. I was prepared to face whatever Sarah had to say, but I reminded myself of my boundaries. I had worked hard to reclaim my life, and I wouldn't let her pull me back into her emotional turmoil. The next day, I arrived at the agreed-upon cafe, my heart pounding as I waited for her to arrive. When she walked in, I barely recognized her. The woman who once stood beside me was now a ghost of her former self, with an air of uncertainty surrounding her. "Thanks for meeting me," she said, her voice shaky. "I know things ended badly and I don't expect you to forgive me, but I wanted to talk." I nodded, encouraging her to continue. "What's on your mind?" With tears in her eyes, Sarah began to explain her struggles since we separated. She had sought therapy herself, grappling with the shame of her actions and the realization of how deeply she had hurt me. "I've been working on myself," she said. "I know I made terrible choices and I'm sorry for everything. I've come to terms with the fact that I lost you, and I don't want to make excuses anymore." As she spoke, I felt a mixture of sympathy and frustration. I had spent so long healing from her betrayal, and now she was trying to evoke feelings I had fought hard to let go of. "Sarah," I said gently, "I appreciate you coming to talk and taking responsibility for your actions, but I can't allow myself to go back to that place. I'm rebuilding my life and I need to focus on what's ahead." She nodded, tears falling from her cheeks. "I understand. I just wanted to apologize and to let you know that I'm sorry for how everything turned out." Her words hung in the air and I could see the sincerity in her eyes. In that moment, I felt a sense of closure wash over me. I had no desire to rekindle our relationship, but I could acknowledge her growth and the pain we both had experienced. As we parted ways that day, I felt lighter. I had faced my past with courage, allowing myself to truly close that chapter. I was ready to embrace the future, and I knew that whatever lay ahead, I had the strength to face it head-on. With Emily by my side, I felt hopeful about the journey ahead, ready to continue building a life filled with authentic connections, trust, and love. As the weeks turned into months, the memories of my past began to fade into the background. The scars of betrayal were still there, but they no longer defined me. I was learning to embrace my newfound strength, focusing on building a life that aligned with my values and desires. Emily and I continued to grow closer, sharing our dreams and aspirations. She had a refreshing perspective on life, and her support was something I cherished deeply. We spent weekends exploring new hiking trails, cooking together, and even volunteering at the local animal shelter. Each moment felt like a step toward building a future based on trust, mutual respect, and authentic connection. One afternoon, while we were hiking on a particularly scenic trail, I paused to take in the view. The sun was shining brightly, casting a warm glow over the landscape, and for the first time in a long while, I felt truly at peace. Emily stood beside me, her hair catching the light as she smiled. "Isn't it beautiful?" she asked, her eyes sparkling with enthusiasm. "It really is," I replied, feeling a wave of gratitude wash over me. "I'm so glad we're doing this together." As we continued our hike, the conversation naturally flowed toward our futures. "Have you thought about what you want in the long run?" Emily asked, glancing at me with curiosity. "I have," I admitted. "I want to continue building meaningful connections and focusing on my mental health. I want to create a life that I'm proud of, not just for myself but for the people I care about. I want to find joy in the little things." She nodded, her expression thoughtful. "That sounds wonderful. And what about relationships? Do you see us going somewhere together?" I took a moment to reflect on her question. I felt a warmth in my chest at the thought of a future with Emily. "I do. I care about you deeply, and I'd love to explore where this goes. I've been through a lot, but I believe we can build something beautiful together if we're both open and honest." Her face lit up with a bright smile and she reached for my hand, intertwining our fingers as we continued on the trail. "I feel the same way. I think we can create something special, and I'm here for the long haul." With each step we took, I felt a sense of hope blossoming within me. I was no longer the man who had been betrayed. I was a survivor, someone who had faced the darkness and emerged stronger. I had learned the importance of setting boundaries, communicating my needs, and finding strength within myself. As summer transitioned into fall, I took the time to reflect on my journey. I realized that healing was not a destination but an ongoing process. There would be ups and downs, but I was committed to embracing every moment. I had forged genuine connections with people who supported me, and I was learning to let go of the past, no longer allowing it to dictate my future. One crisp autumn evening, as the leaves began to change colors, I invited Emily over for a special dinner. I had prepared her favorite meal, and the table was adorned with candles and soft music playing in the background. As we sat down to eat, I felt a rush of gratitude for her presence in my life. After dinner, we moved to the couch and I took a deep breath, feeling a sense of calm wash over me. "I want to share something with you," I said, my heart racing slightly. "I've learned a lot about myself over the past few months, and I feel ready to truly commit to what we have." Emily looked at me, her expression a mix of surprise and excitement. "What do you mean?" I smiled, feeling a warmth spreading through me. "I want to be with you, Emily. I want to build a life together, to navigate this journey hand in hand. You've shown me what it means to be supported and loved without conditions, and I don't want to take that for granted." Her eyes glistened with emotion, and she reached for my hand. "I'd love that. I've been hoping you'd say something like this. I care about you so much, and I believe we can create something beautiful together." In that moment, I felt a sense of relief and joy. I had finally opened my heart to love again, allowing myself the chance to be vulnerable with someone who truly cared for me. It felt like a new beginning, and I was ready to embrace it. As we talked and shared our dreams for the future, I reflected on how far I had come. The road hadn't been easy, but it had been worth every step. I had faced my demons, navigated the pain of betrayal, and emerged on the other side, stronger and more resilient than ever. In the months that followed, Emily and I continued to nurture our relationship, supporting each other through life's challenges. I remained committed to my healing journey, attending therapy and finding solace in my connections with friends, family, and the growing bond I shared with her. I learned that healing wasn't just about moving on. It was about growing, evolving, and becoming the best version of myself. I was no longer defined by the pain of my past, but rather by the strength I had gained from it. As I looked toward the future, I felt a sense of excitement and hope. I was ready to embrace new adventures, to find joy in the everyday moments, and to build a life filled with love, trust, and authenticity. I had learned valuable lessons about myself, and I was determined to carry those lessons forward. True recovery required trustworthy support, and I was grateful to have found that in Emily. Together, we would navigate the journey ahead, hand in hand, ready to face whatever challenges life had in store. I was no longer alone. I had discovered the power of connection, love, and the strength that comes from facing adversity head-on. The best was yet to come, and I was prepared to embrace every moment of it.